Hello, welcome back to Marathon Man, where I'm going through Doctor Who from the very beginning, and you join me as we recap Season 7. With only 4 stories, Season 7 feels very, very short. And I suppose it is in comparison to the previous 6, but it also feels shorter compared to subsequent seasons. And I think part of that is because the stories within Season 7, apart from the opener, which is only 4 episodes, they use their extended length to phenomenal effect. And sometimes that's not always the case with stories in Doctor Who that are like 6 episodes plus. Where some lengthy stories will fill their time with, like, you know, a little bit more running about or a little bit more toing and froing, the Ambassadors of Death and Inferno in particular, like, they fill out theirs with extensive explorations of their central themes, and they pack more ideas in. They fill them out with ideas, basically, instead of just to and fro and running about, more corridors, capture, recapture. Season 7 is like concentrated bursts of Doctor Who, despite having longer stories. Maybe I'm a sucker for an overhaul, but hitting the beginning of Pertwee's reign was perhaps the major shake-up needed to keep a marathoner on his toes. I wasn't bored of Trout, and I wasn't particularly bored of his era either, thinking that his final season had made some headway in rediscovering Doctor Who's variety, but therein lies one of Doctor Who's biggest strengths. Occasionally, sometimes, every so often, it reconfigures before I want it to. Not always, and sometimes I find those changes disagreeable. But every once in a while, it shapeshifts before I'm ready for it to. And in the case of Jon Pertwee's Doctor, it can sometimes do it with sort of like a swaggering nonchalance. In a season of changes, the biggest one will always be that of the Doctor. And I've always found it really interesting on marathons when I come to a regeneration. Now, the handover from Hartnell to Troughton was fairly obviously seismic. The handover from Troughton to Pertwee marks this changing of the leading man as part of the show's fabric now. And this may make Pertwee's job ever so slightly easier than Troughton's, but not by much. He still has to make his mark on a show where the Doctor's regeneration is still a novelty. Heck, it's not even a guarantee. The show could very easily have ended when Troughton left. Who's to say that the Doctor could regenerate more than once? No, Pertwee still had a hell of a task on his shoulders, and the fact that he emerges from Season 7 as the biggest triumph is no small victory. He makes his mark and takes ownership of the show far more quickly than either of his predecessors, and rapidly establishes himself as not only the new Doctor, but also the old Doctor we've been following for all this time. With all the other changes afoot, that was crucial, and it's to Pertwee's credit that, intentionally or not, he manages to maintain a link to the past. An alien invasion, an earthly invasion, but by which side, an interplanetary misunderstanding, and an excellent jump sideways into a parallel universe make for what could probably be Doctor Who's strongest season so far. And given that almost everything about it was a risk, that is wildly impressive. So after 54 stories and 7 seasons, what does my top 10 look like right now? Number 10, The Savages. Still holding on in the top 10 at this point. The Savages knocked me for 6 this time around. I've always liked it, but that it's still in the top 10 after Doctor Who's first 7 seasons just goes to show how much I loved it this time. Number 9, Doctor Who and the Silurians. A new entry, and it's no surprise to be the one which perhaps has the most ingenious approach to the show's fairly limiting new format. Alien invasion or mad scientists were supposedly the only 2 types the production team could plump for, so instead Malcolm Hulke came up with this as a solution, and they did it second, creating one of Doctor Who's most enduring parts of its own lore. Number 8, The Mythmakers. I think this story really is a bit of hidden Doctor Who treasure. Quite literally, if there are still film prints of it out there somewhere. And if not, then it still manages to be one of Season 3's best stories, even without its moving images. I know some people find it hard to get on with, but this one, I think it's wonderful. Number 7. Marco Polo. From one completely missing historical to another. For a story which is mainly about getting a key back, there's so much going on here that at 7 episodes, it doesn't feel like it drags. There's a sweeping, epic quality to this one which enriches the nature of the Doctor's travels early on in the show. Another piece of missing treasure. Number 6. The Aztecs. Marco Polo might have helped to solidify what Doctor Who was capable of in its early days, but I think the Aztecs helped to solidify what Doctor Who was. The balance of elements here isn't bettered in Season 1, and at 4 episodes it has a streamlined quality to it which really helps. Number 5. The Mind Robber. What happens when Doctor Who tears up the rulebook and just goes for it? Sometimes it winds up looking silly, but not with The Mind Robber, a story which is so successful that it ends up feeling entirely unique in the whole show. Imagination up to maximum. Number 4. The Time Meddler. The final story of Season 2 introduces us to another of the Doctor's people for the first time since Susan, and meshes together the two distinct flavours of Doctor Who for the first time. History and science fiction blend and end up becoming the default for Doctor Who's subsequent jaunts into Earth's past. A quietly game-changing story. Number 3. The Massacre. Maybe not game-changing, because while Doctor Light episodes have become a part of the modern show's fabric now, this sort of experiment hasn't really been repeated. Steven's sense of being stranded really comes through, and the stakes had never felt higher for him. Convincingly played by Peter Purves. Another unique story in Doctor Who. Number 2. The War Games. Briefly in the top spot, it has been bumped only one season later. Now, the Time Meddler might have been quietly game-changing, but there's nothing quiet about the War Games. This takes the show by the scruff of the neck, bravely does away with some of the Doctor's mystery, but adds layers more, and writes out a fantastic Doctor in a satisfying way. In 10 episodes, without feeling bloated. Hugely impressive. Number 1. Inferno. For someone who wouldn't say the Third Doctor's era was his favourite era, and who wouldn't say the Third Doctor was his favourite Doctor, I have to give credit where it's due, and Inferno is absolutely brilliant TV. The use of a parallel world to show us what's in store for the characters we know and love is a genius move. It's another flavour for Doctor Who to sample, and ends up being incredibly tense. That I had a fantastic time watching it didn't surprise me, it never does. But that it shot straight to the top this time? Yeah, wasn't expecting that. The furniture being shifted to accommodate an earthbound setting actually feels still like a novelty more than a shackle at this point. And it's really actually rather nice spending a bit more time with Lethbridge Stewart and watching his relationship with the Doctor become slightly more complex. Seeing the man he could be if things turned out differently, as we did in Inferno, only deepens our understanding of the man in our version of reality. It offers context, perhaps uncomfortable context, which we wish we didn't have, but it certainly makes for a deeper character study than perhaps we've been used to up until this point. Benton has really yet to make an impression, although he'll become more part of the furniture as we go on, but what little we've seen of him does show promise. There's a lovely moment in Inferno where he hasn't been able to acquire Starman's presence as the Brigadier had ordered, and he and the Brig share a very knowing scene. There's a twinkle in both their eyes, which makes me feel like I'm in safe hands with this bunch. Other than Pertwee though, this season's MVP is most definitely his new companion, although I think for the first time ever, the term associate might actually be more appropriate. And now we're coming to a thorny issue here, which may have some of you reaching for your pitchforks. I don't consider the unit family companions. So, they won't be featuring in the top 10 companions list. And I know some of you might be thinking, the Brigadier must certainly be there. And I do understand that. I understand that he has a larger part to play in the core regulars of an era of Doctor Who than even some companions did. However, I can't consider him a companion I just can't bring myself to. It's more to do with the fact that I think he's technically has travelled in the TARDIS, but not on a regular basis, and he became part of a grounding aspect, and more of a recurring character than a bona fide companion. But it's almost guaranteed, isn't it, that Liz will feature in the top 10. So the only question remains is, what place? Number 10, Polly Wright. Down a place owing to Liz's placement higher up. I'll be repeating myself to say that Polly's placing is almost entirely down to Annika Will's performance rather than Polly's handling on the page. But Annika Will's performance is so good that I'm glad to see her still hanging on to a place in the top 10. Number 9, Ian Chesterton. Down another place, and it still feels strange. But the object of the exercise isn't to favour historic favourites, it's to accurately convey my opinions as they are right now, and marathons can change them. It's part of the fun. So while it does feel odd to have Ian this low at this point, I cannot tell a lie. Number 8, Ben Jackson. Obviously pushed out of favour slightly once Jamie shows up. Ben as a character has a great deal of charm, and Michael Cray's even more. So it's a winning combination, and that brief run of stories where he's a presence really benefits from his different kind of attitude and vibe. Number 7, Victoria Waterfield. Once in the bottom 5 of all companions, she's now in the top 10 after 7 seasons. Obviously, that's subject to change as we tick off more seasons, but it does go to show how much opinions on this programme can change in fans over time. I really like her now, and that's lovely. Number 6, Liz Shaw. Here she is. You can see why the producers ran into trouble with this character. They'll tell you it's because she was too clever and so had no questions to ask the Doctor, which unfortunately cut her time on the show short as a result. If I can be a bit cheeky, they're trying to save their own skins a little bit there, I think. They actually ran into trouble with her because they didn't handle her properly. It's all there from very early on. She makes a hell of a first impression in Spearhead from Space, and then gradually is told to stay out of the action before making an admirable comeback in The Ambassadors of Death, which continued in Inferno, only for the decision to have already been made to not have her back. She was brilliant in what we saw of her and had even more potential, in my opinion. Where the Brigadier's counterpart in Inferno offers a rather bleak insight into a man we've come to like, Elizabeth in Inferno, Liz's counterpart, instead offers a different trajectory. She has a very different development from the brigade leader, and in so doing kind of offers a glimpse into what Liz in our world would be capable of if we'd have spent more time with her. Elizabeth's redemption throws up a picture of Liz being fundamentally a heroic character, but like Dodo, she very often drew the short straw and became a scapegoat for, and this might be sacrilege, the production team's short-sightedness. She could have been the greatest companion ever. And it's also telling that, like Dodo, she exits the show off screen. Number 5, Stephen Taylor. Ostensibly Ian's replacement, Stephen just had a bit more about him than plucky hero. Ian felt defined by having Barbara around, whereas Stephen felt like his own character, probably bolstered by his outstanding solo turn in The Massacre. Number 4, Vicky Pallister. Ostensibly Susan's replacement, Vicky just had more about her than granddaughter figure for the Doctor. A healthy streak of impertinence, along with genuine excitement for her travels, carve her into a more rounded character. Number 3, Jamie McCrimmon. Each Doctor has a definitive companion, and the second Doctor's is almost certainly Jamie. There for practically his entire era, Jamie grew into a lovable character very, very quickly. But Fraser Hines' chemistry with Patrick Troughton made for an indelible double act. And, if I may be so bold, television magic. Number 2. And yet, Zoe winds up being a more fun presence for me, undoubtedly helped by her winning friendship with Jamie as much as her friendship with the Doctor. Jamie is a huge reason why Zoe works, and so it's almost like he's giving her a leg up in this list. But however she got there, she's reached number 2, and that's because she is awesome. Number 1, Barbara Wright. I can't see this changing anytime soon. It's the 7th time I've done this ranking of companions now, and she's always at the top. If she's to be usurped, I genuinely don't know who it will be or when they'll do it. As with previous ones, I don't know what's happening with this marathon. I really don't. Before I began it, if you'd have asked me at the end of season 7, would Ian still be in your top 5 companions? I would have said, of course he will be. I'm not mad, but there we go. It's why we marathon, I suppose. And now I'm entering the meat of Pertwee's tenure. This is where his era begins to level out, for better or for worse, and I really don't think we get another season like season 7. For the rest of Doctor Who. It's almost, rather appropriately, it feels like Doctor Who from a parallel universe. We began the season with very little about it feeling familiar, but we leave it with one of its most iconic Doctors, 2 enduring monsters, and the sting leading into the cliffhanger. So, thank you, Season 7. You were boss. As ever, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this recap of one of Doctor Who's most rewarding years, then you know how YouTube works. Please do give it a like and share it all over. And what do you think of Season 7? Is it as brilliant as I've made out, or is it too different a flavour to properly land for you? Is your top 10 anything like mine, or could we not be further apart? And where does Liz sit in your top 10 companions? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you back here soon for a rematch with the Autons. Yeah. And the first appearance of Roger Delgado as one of the show's most enduring creations. That's more like it. So, if you don't want to miss that, hit the subscribe button, clang the cloister bell, and I'll see you at the circus.